Alrighty, I think it's time to talk about PragerU. Now, I know that PragerU is everybody's favorite topic, because my analytics at least say it is, but it's not really one of my favorite ones. Despite the fact that their videos are 5 minutes, they're usually filled with a hyper-condensed amount of bullshit, and it's kind of a tedium to get through them. But we're going to go through it anyway, and, you know, I've learned something. When there's tedium to go through, fan art is often always the best serotonin. So this one is dropped by Wildflower, and they said they liked the slime Suris design, so they decided to crochet themselves one. If anyone else happens to want to make one, they posted the pattern to Ravelry. So if you happen to crochet, there's a slime Suris that is available for you to crochet now. I think I want to thank Suzu again for making the slime model. It is wonderful. The next model in our rotation is to go back to the slime model for a couple episodes for everybody who is waiting on that. Alrighty! As always, thank you all for the fan art submissions, though we only do one a day now. If you want your fan art to be shown in a future episode, the best way to do so is to drop it into the Discord server. With that said, let's go ahead and go over to good old PU.
There were many American heroes on 9/11, but the greatest were the passengers and crew of Flight 93. Not only did they avert what Al-Qaeda planned, a direct hit on the White House, but they also embodied Patrick Henry's credo, "Give me liberty or give me death." Do those words still have a meaning in America today?
Yeah?
For 2 decades, I've spoken out against those strands of Islam that gave rise to Al-Qaeda. In this fight for freedom, I have faced many death threats. Yet, I have always consoled myself that in the US, freedom of conscience and expression were paramount values. It was partly for this reason that I moved here and became a citizen in 2013. It never occurred to me that free speech would come under threat in my newly adopted country.
Is free speech under threat in the United States? I'm just curious, because usually there has to be some kind of legislation or something. I haven't really seen that so much as I've seen people just getting mad on school campuses.
In 2014, I was invited to receive an honorary degree at Brandeis University and then ungraciously disinvited. Even when
Well, you were disinvited for that, and that sucks. But Ivana Dragmeyer is about to be disinvited from the entire fucking chat. Dear God, why do you guys save up so many of these? For 50,001 channel points. For 50,001 channel points, Ivana Dragmeyer has redeemed a tactical Nuwook. Their words, not mine. You saved up enough. You deserve me saying your cringe-ass phrase. For holding me at channel point gunpoint, you get exactly what you asked for, even if I hate it. Oh, whoa? And a part of me died on the inside that day. And it never came back. It's at this point that I realize that I think PragerU might be easier for me to take than saying those words. Huh. I think Chad hates me.
When I first encountered what has come to be known as cancel culture, I didn't fret too much. I was inclined to dismiss the alliance of campus leftists and Islamists as a lunatic fringe. They are not the fringe anymore. Many on the left, academia, the media, and now even the corporate world have inculcated in a generation of students an ideology that has much more in common with the intolerant doctrines of a religious cult than with the secular political thought I studied at Holland's Leiden University.
All right, so let's go ahead and talk about this for a second. So this is basically painting with the broadest of brushes possible. Are there people who are incredibly, what's the best word, insular with the way that they think? Yes. But those people exist on the right and the left. This is not a strictly left-wing thing. PragerU has a bit of an onus in trying to make sure that actual, rigorous academia is seen as tainted by post-communist, Marxist what-have-yous. Because While PragerU is not an actual accredited university, actual accredited universities get to look at the things PragerU puts out and laughs at them. This seems to me to be another one of those videos where if they paint with a broad enough brush, everybody will have some idea of what they're looking at. Let me kind of give you an example. So, if I say, and you're a right-winger, and if you're a right-winger in the audience, maybe let me know, but if I say leftists are intolerant, you probably know somebody who you would consider an intolerant leftist. And by me saying that phrase, you immediately have a thought-terminating cliche of what constitutes an intolerant leftist. And that comes to the forefront of your mind, and you use that as a reference point for the conversation going forward. Now, when I say a radical jihadist, you have another idea of what that is in your head. Now, when I combine the two, and if I do this enough, especially saying it with the confidence that they say in a PragerU video, you might actually start to associate the two. I know because I have friends who are Republican, and I've had this conversation with them about what actually is a leftist and what is just their straw man idea of a leftist that they've only ever had explained to them. Does this straw man idea of a person exist? Probably. It's the purpose of a reductio ad absurdum. But this thought-terminating cliche is used by places like PragerU because it lets them bolster themselves up by making a sweeping statement that throws away the credibility of other potential sides. Again, this type of individual exists on the right and the left, but by not talking about the right-wing version of this problem, they effectively get to sweep it all under the rug. And remember, they're not like a random political commentator like I am. They're basically pushing themselves forward as a university, as a school. These are put forward as things you can use to educate yourself, as opposed to merely entertainment on the internet. Okay? Now, let's continue.
In the debates after 9/11, many people sought materialist explanations for the attacks. The jihadis lacked educational and employment opportunities. They were angry at American foreign policy in the Middle East, and so on. I argued that none of these could explain the motivations of the plotters and hijackers, all of whom in any case came from middle-class and upper-class homes. Their goal was religious and political.
Wait, hold on, but everything you just mentioned, those are political problems. Education and employment opportunities, those are political problems. American foreign policy, those are political problems. When you say, no, these aren't the reasons, they're actually political reasons. The things that you had just said are political reasons. They're not necessarily religious, except when you consider the fact that you brought up foreign policy and you brought up, what was it? Brain is frying for a second. You brought up education. Education is not a religious problem, except in unique cases like where it actually fucking is. Say places that are largely controlled by particular religious groups. I mean, hell, I grew up at a Christian university. Well, it called itself that. Pensacola Christian Academy has its own university. I spent the first formative years of my life there. But there are people who spent their entire educational careers there. Those education problems got mixed with religious problems real fucking fast. But that's just a hole in the speech here. This seems to be a way of trying to win over the atheistic and secular crowd, who usually tended to dunk on PragerU until they started making cookies for them.
Denounce Arab governments as corrupt and their Western allies as infidels, and ultimately to overthrow the existing order in the Middle East and establish a caliphate. American policymakers preferred the materialist explanations as they implied actions to solve the problem. Invasion, regime change, democratization. It was unpopular to suggest that the terrorists might have unshakable convictions having nothing to do with material considerations.
Okay. Now, I'm actually curious, is this analysis accurate? Because I actually don't know enough about everything that happened on 9/11 where this particular, like, within the framing of this argument, to know if this is an accurate statement. I can't actually talk on this. But what I will say is it is very strange to me. And I'm gonna engage in Tukokwe for a second here. But it is strange to me that PragerU is so concerned with Islam trying to set up a caliphate while simultaneously arguing several times in their videos that America's a Christian nation and it's founded on Judeo-Christian values, in which they get to push basically that all of our laws should be based on the Bible in some way, shape, or form, where we get to be a secular country in name only, but in practice we get to actually be a religious theocracy. This is a thing you see happen in a lot of places in the United States, where we have secular areas of government, but the reasoning behind several laws that get put out end up being religious reasonings. And when these religious reasonings are used constantly, you get to call yourself secular pretty much in name only. Because ultimately, if all of your laws are being changed, are being done, are being implemented for reasons that align with religiosity, then at what point have we actually gone into various stages of theocratic governship? My argument is that in certain places in the United States, those lines are very blurred. They shouldn't be, but they are. Think of how many times states have had to argue against the reteaching of creationism in school. Think about several of the abortion arguments that stem almost entirely from religious convictions. It is insane to me the amount of grounding this stuff has in religiosity. Doesn't mean that religiosity itself is bad. I just don't think it should be implemented at the state level, like, ever.
2 decades later, we see a similar dynamic, only this time it's within America's borders. Naive observers explain the Black Lives Matter protests and riots of 2020 in terms of blacks' material disadvantages.
Okay, how is that naive, though? Wait, hold on. The Black Lives Matter movement literally is founded on the principle that there is a material disadvantage to being an African American in the United States. And one of the ways that that material disadvantage materializes is in the higher death rates where police officers are concerned, where they kill more people who happen to be African American in the United States. And the over-policing of African American neighborhoods, which is, again, a material disadvantage. How is that a naive conversation? Or do you want to try to dismiss the entire BLM movement and everybody who agrees with it as a religious sycophant?
These are real, as are the far worse socioeconomic problems of the Arab world, but they hide the leaders' real motivations.
Ah, yes, the BLM leaders, despite the fact that most people who actually care about the BLM movement can't even name them, and don't care about them, because they are practically a non-factor.
Their ideology goes by many names: social justice, critical race theory.
Critical race theory is not an ideology. It is literally just a foundational concept taught in fucking law schools. Holy shit.
And intersectionality are just a few. For simplicity, I call it all wokeism.
No, you don't. If you did, you wouldn't be saying the... Okay, look, I know that PragerU writes these scripts primarily, right? This sounds... The way you just said that, it sounds like this is the first time you've said that fucking word. I'm sorry, I hate to throw doubt on the good faith nature of the conversation coming from a PragerU video, but that sounds like one of the first times you've said that word. It doesn't sound like it rolls off your tongue very well. So I don't think you just call it that. I think PragerU calls it that, and you read it off their script.
I'm not about to equate wokeism and Islamism.
Yes, you are.
Islamism is a militant strain of an ancient faith. Its believers have a coherent sense of what Allah wants them to achieve on earth to earn rewards in the afterlife.
Okay.
Wokeism is just another version of Marxism. It scorns religion and the idea of an afterlife.
No. If that was the case... Wait, what? Hold on. Remember what I mentioned before? About how there's like that blurry line between what makes something a theocracy and what makes it a secular government that just happens to have all of its laws and all of its thought built on theological, ideological values? Oh boy, we seem to be here right now. In this really awkward place. Scorning religion. Why does that matter? Why does that matter? It functionally doesn't for this. Now, if you want to get into some of the individual issues with certain forms of anti-theism, then that's fine. But this is painting with literally the broadest brush to say that everybody who is a Marxist or considers themselves woke scorns religion and the idea of the afterlife. No, that's not the case. Literally, like... Okay. There are several spiritual movements, especially in the African-American community, as I was made aware of after making my Hotep video, that are fundamentally based on the idea of religiosity and the afterlife, but a rejection of several commonly understood truths that had been preached to them over the years. Now, I say commonly understood truths because there was once upon a time where we would use skull shapes to determine the IQ of an individual. We now know that this is a terrible way of determining IQ, and we now even know that IQ is a terrible way of determining practically anything. But the idea, a lot of these ideas stemmed from variants of religiosity. Some of the most, quote, woke people that I know, again, this is painting with such a broad brush that they might fall in and out of this definition depending on the time of day, are religious people. I have friends who have done Black Lives Matter protests who are pagan, who are Christian. Like, what? None of them score in the idea of an afterlife. But this is the problem with painting with such a broad brush. You will inevitably find people who don't fall into these categories. Because when you paint with the giant-ass paintbrush here, like you're playing a really, really awkward game of Splatoon, you end up missing shit all the time. But this is how propaganda works. Remember earlier in the video I pointed out that when you hear these ideas, like let's say you're a Christian fundamentalist and you hear the idea that wokeism, you already know the woke's a term you don't like because you probably listen to conservative talk radio, is another version of Marxism. Well, you already know Marxism's something you don't like because you probably listen to conservative talk radio, or you're a preacher talking about it, despite the fact that an economic theory has nothing to do with the fucking Bible. And then you hear that it scorns religion and the idea of an afterlife. You might have a loved one who you think is waiting for you in heaven, and so this is now personally insulting to you. Because if my ideas, as an example, of an afterlife are true, then you don't get to see your loved one when you die. And that is personally offensive to you. And here's the thing. I can understand why you would think that. I can understand where that sense is coming from, because that's how I felt when I was in the middle of my deconversion. That idea that I might not actually see my grandpa again one day when I was looking forward to it for a very fucking long time. The idea that family members of mine or friends of mine that had died up to that point are gone. They're out forever. They're not in a better place. I'm not going to see them again. That idea was hard to wrestle with. So when you're considering it for the first time, it is deeply offensive to you. And I don't want to say that, Christian fundamentalists are all snowflakes. As funny as that would be to go on that tangent, the fact of the matter is, that is a deeply personal thing. So when PragerU is sitting here communicating to you that these people scorn religion and the idea of an afterlife, religion might be the thing that is a foundational principle in your personal morality. It's a foundational principle in how you comport your life. And again, like I said, the idea of an afterlife, if they don't believe an afterlife exists and they're right, then you don't get to see your loved ones again. Moreover, your time on this earth might be a lot more wasted than you might think. When you combine all that together, it's easy to see how PragerU can turn people on the left into enemies of people who consider themselves Christian or in any way religious. Because PragerU is painting with such a broad brush to create an idea, a facsimile of an enemy for them to fight, that even people who they consider friends right now might fall into that category.
Wokeism divides society into myriad identities, whereas Islamist division is simpler, believers and unbelievers. There are many other differences, but consider the resemblances.
Oh boy, the Venn diagram gets deeper. Before we get into that, though, A.N. Windsor, thank you very much for redeeming your points for an oh whoa. Oh whoa. Albison says, doing a little bit of research, A.N. is a critic of Islam primarily, so the only way this video makes any sense is by equating wokeism as a religion, which it isn't. Well, let's see how she does it.
The adherents of each pursue ideological purity, certain of their own rectitude. Neither Islamists nor the woke will engage in debate.
I seem to find a prominent debater right there who would be considered woke. Oh, God, there's another one. Ah, fuck, Jesus. God, my hand keeps slipping. Let's try again. Maybe we'll find another leftist who won't debate who can fit into this category real quick. Hold on. Who is Xander Hall? Huh, god damn it. We seem to have hit another person who is considered woke and will willingly debate people. God, this is getting weird. This is getting awkward. How many times do I have to go into that frickin' YouTube search or that Google search to find examples of people who are considered woke who will literally debate you? Oh, yeah, no, you got another one. Sorry, hold on. Just fucking... Who is... Jesus fucking Christ. Oh, man. My finger slipped. Oh, God. Who is this man's? God, I don't even... God, my finger keeps slipping again. Who is actual Jake? Oh, boy. Papa Bird Jake? Gee, I wonder if they debate anybody. Yeah, they do. They do. The answer is they do. The answer is they do. Like, I could keep on doing this routine. I could keep on doing it for ages. But we've already got the first one debunked, so the woke won't engage in debate, except when they do.
Both prefer indoctrination of the submissive and damnation of those who resist.
Again, I think that the fact that we have various characters who have had their minds changed in debate, and as opposed to being indoctrinated or submissive, they were literally combative during the entire time, and yet moved over closer to the left, Hunter Avalon being a very good example of this, throws this one away as well. If I preferred indoctrination, I probably wouldn't have ever had that conversation with Call for an Uprising. Probably wouldn't have ever had my conversations with Hunter Avalon. Probably would have never had debates with people like Michael Moreno or various other Christian people over on Modern Day Debate. None of that would have ever happened because I'm considered a Marxist, wokist piece of human garbage. I literally am all of these things that you are arguing against, and yet, like a walking contradiction, here I am existing.
The two ideologies have distinctive rituals. Islamists shout Allahu Akbar and death to America. The woke shout Black Lives Matter and I can't breathe.
Why did they shout those things? Could it possibly be that there was somebody who was killed who said I can't breathe? Could it possibly be that? How long has the woke existed? Did it just start after George Floyd? Oh God, no! I can't listen to this song. Goodbye. Nope. Later. But no, seriously, how long has, quote, the woke existed in the United States? This is not a distinctive ritual of then. It was a rallying cry about a very specific situation that has mostly gone away now. V Darkstar, thank you very much for the follow.
Islamists pray to Mecca. The woke take the knee. Both.
Why did he take the knee, though? Why did he take the knee? Because last I checked, the reason that the knee was taken was because of police brutality. Jesus, that's not the same thing as a fucking ritual, my dude.
Both like burning the American flag.
Both for very different reasons. Okay, so here's the thing. This caricature of Islam burns the flag because they want to destroy America, because it is a Christian nation, insofar as we have a majority Christian populace, and we stand basically in violent opposition of them. That is based on a caricature of Islam, mind you, so I'm just throwing that out there. The woke, quote-unquote, who burn the American flag, do it generally in form of protest, because there is an idea of America we have in our heads, an idea of a place where people can actually achieve the American dream en masse, not just ye lucky few who can play the role of the shark and eat all the minnows on their way up. Burning the American flag is also considered a legal form of protest, mind you, but the point is, One burns the American flag because they hate America. The other burns the American flag because they hate what America currently is and lament what it should be. There's a difference between a place that wants to claim dominion over your country and one that can admit the faults of your country and try to make it better. But, you know, I guess the history of things like self-immolation as form of protest have been completely lost on the entirety of Prager University for literal ages.
Both take offense at every opportunity and demand not just apologies but concessions.
So, this highly depends on the individual. I don't think I've heard... I'm not gonna do a voice. There was a part of me that decided for a half second to do the Ahmed voice, but I'm not going to because I realize that could be offensive to a lot of people. But I don't see. Oh wow, that's actually really ironic considering the subject matter here. But I don't see a lot of people who are in Islam just saying that they are offended by X thing, unless they are trying to basically play parody here. Yes, there are a lot of people on the left. The wokeism thing is literally just a way of saying the left. There are a lot of people on the left who do point out that they are offended by certain things. But those things need to be had with nuance. Those things need to be had with conversations. Poor Haas, thank you very much for the follow. Oh, they're Haas accounts. Oh boy, those are probably bots. Those are probably bots. We'll be turning off our alert box here in a bit. But anyway, point is, if you're going to do this thing where you broad brush people who are left or broad brush people who are woke, when you're talking about the offense comment, maybe it's a good idea to look at the nuance of those conversations. What are they offended by, and why? Are they offended because you've done something that legitimately hurts them? Something like, say, misgendering them, which can bring up a trauma response. Something like, say, forcing them out, forcing minority groups out of certain bathrooms. These are things that are perfectly fine to take offense at things. But, you know, PragerU is not about nuance.
Islamism invades against blasphemy. Wokeism wants to outlaw hate speech.
Okay, I guess the UK is woke because they have hate speech laws. I wonder if they realize that America is like one of the exceptions where that's concerned. It's not the rule. But anyways.
Islamists use the word Islamophobia to silence critics. The woke do the same with racism.
Okay. Are there forms of Islamophobia that happen, though, that are, like, legitimately Islamophobia? Yes, and anybody that says that they don't, please go crawl back under a fucking cave. The edgy atheist thing of 2016, it's done. It's done. Also, racism is a real thing that happens. There are people who have prejudice against people who are Muslims merely because they are Muslims. That is a form of Islamophobia. There are people who have issues with people who are black, people who are of a different race than them. That's racism. If you've ever once heard this phrase in one way, shape, or form, look, I just don't want my daughter dating a black guy, okay? If you've ever heard that, congratulations, racism's still real.
Both ideologies aim to tear down the existing system and replace it with utopias that always turn out to be hellish anarchies.
Oh boy, we got a thing to get into there. But Miyakota Storm points out, what's the difference between blasphemy and hate speech, though? Glad you asked. The difference between the two is very simple. So, with blasphemy, we are talking about the ways in which a god, somebody who we can't demonstrate to exist or not, is offended by a particular thing. Either because you claimed you are God or you claim something against God. That is a way of determining blasphemy. Basically, is my God offended? Now, if we're talking about something like hate speech, we are talking about something that hurts real people. People who actually exist. At the end of the day, you and I cannot agree on whether or not your God exists. But we can agree on whether or not my neighbor exists, whether or not my cousin exists. We can agree on these things, and because we can agree on them, we can at the very least understand that there's a fundamental difference between the ideas of hate speech and the ideas of blasphemy. With hate speech, there are people who are actually hurt in these scenarios. With blasphemy, I don't know if your God of the Karen is actually real. I have no way of knowing, and you have no way of demonstrating it to me.
Islamic State in Raqqa, the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone in Seattle. Both are collectivist. Group identity trumps the individual.
So, the idea of collectivism is not the idea that group identity trumps the individual. The idea is that if you are a hyper-individual, you are basically sacrificing everybody around you for the sake of being selfish. It's not about group identity. It is about... What's the best way to put this? There's nothing about you being in a union that makes you less useful than you as an individual worker. But you being in a union means you have more power and bargaining power against an individual with infinitely more so than yourself. That's kind of the idea here. And not all people who consider themselves woke are actually collectivists.
Both tolerate and often glorify violence carried out by zealots.
Okay, so the difference here is very simple. And I hope you can see one of the main differences here. One of these is military violence and suicide bombings. The other difference is something that could be seen as rioting. Now, mind, the vast majority of BLM protests were not violent. And of the ones that were violent, the majority of the ones that turned violent were violent because the police officers did things like shoot first or gas everybody first. But go ahead and use those few examples as a way of painting everyone as bad. Go ahead, do it. I mean, you already did it here. Secondly, the difference between military action in the way that it's being described with Islam and, we'll go ahead and say riots here, military action, in many ways, is just oppressive in and of itself. Whereas what happens with a riot, when we're talking about the situation here, a riot is the voice of the unheard. What you need to ask yourself is, what message is it that has not been heard? What message has been attempted to be delivered that in its failure, people have resorted to violence? In years past, it was a lot of civil rights issues. Now it's issues of policy. And I don't know what it's going to be in the future. But whenever you see a riot break out, you need to look at the core issues that they're squabbling over. Not all of them are justified. When we look at the things that happened during January 6th, the end results came about because there were people who thought that Donald Trump should have still been president. That's not a legitimate reason to fucking riot. Your favorite orange man not being able to sit in his bag of Cheetos every day in the Oval Office is not an actual thing to get upset over. You basically got mad that your sports team didn't win. But if people who look like you, who breathe and talk like you, which are every human being for that matter, are being killed at a disproportionate rate, you have something to be upset about. Just throwing out the differences there.
The grievances of Islamists and the woke aren't merely economic, and they won't be satisfied with jobs or entitlements or any other blandishments politicians are willing to offer. Their motivations are ideological, and they'll be satisfied only with power, and then they'll demand more power. I cling to the hope that most Americans are still willing to fight, and if necessary, to die to preserve our freedoms.
Wait. Glorifying violence bad, but then you glorify violence and also self-suicide. Whoa there. Also, DM Snow Owl, thank you very much for resubscribing. So good evening, sir. How are you doing this evening? Seems I've jumped into your stream in the middle of a dumpster fire. Got any marshmallows? Yeah, they're in the back. Like, that was a sharp twist. I agree, Miyakota Storm. That was a quick 180. Violence is bad. And to communicate effectively that violence is bad, let me go ahead and show you patriotic violence. You see, when we put the patriotic in front of it, it's no longer violent.
Our rights, our customs, our history.
Our customs are not a thing to fight over. I'm sorry. I just, no. Don't die because of our customs, please. That is a stupid reason to fucking die. You have a family, Tom.
That was the spirit of Flight 93.
Yay, you wrapped it all back up and brought it back to a terrorisms. And I've ceased caring. How many of the points given have they advocated for? I wonder. I don't know. I don't know who wrote her script for this one, but Jesus fucking Christ. No wonder we've got people like frickin' Atheism is Unstoppable who were willing to just regurgitate this nonsense. That melted your brain? Oh, it stuck a pitchfork in mine. My brain's done. It's fried. It's al dente. I have an al dente brain now. But I want to know how your brain's doing. I've commented enough about how I feel about this particular video. My conclusion is that this is a way of painting people with a broad enough brush that PragerU can make everybody on the left out to be enemies of everybody else. That's what I think. Okay, we're not... I just realized Pokemon Unite was playing in the background that whole time. Fuck that. Anyways, if you enjoyed this video, let me know in the comment section below, or hit the like button, subscribe if you haven't already. As always, everyone, insert in the video tagline here. Hey, thank you so much for watching this video. It really means a lot to me. If you want access to behind-the-scenes content for the channel, please consider checking out my Patreon. I do weekly vlogs over there, where I give real-life updates to what's going on behind the scenes on the channel, stuff that you don't really get over here, and even on Twitch. Patreon also helps the channel's stability a whole lot. Without Patreon, I wouldn't be able to do this at all. Especially with the kind of content that I do, neither YouTube nor Twitch are the most stable sources of income. If you are a $20 and up patron, then you will be featured on the ending slides as shown in the beginning of the end credits. If you want to catch the streams where all this content comes from, then consider heading over to Twitch and following. And if you want to continue watching over here on YouTube, maybe consider clicking one of the end screen videos. And once again, I want to thank you so much for spending your time with me over on my channel. I wouldn't be able to do literally anything that I'm doing over here on YouTube without each and every one of you. So, thank you.